Brothers and sisters, tonight I want to talk to you about something that holds so many people back: weakness. We all have it, every single one of us. There's not a person in this room who hasn't felt inadequate, unqualified, or not good enough at some point in life. But I'm here to tell you something tonight. Your weakness is not the end of you, because God has given you something powerful, the ability to take what is weak in your life and turn it into your greatest strength. All throughout history, the greatest men and women who ever lived were not the strongest, not the smartest, not the most talented, but they were people who took what was broken, what was weak, and they turned it into something mighty. Moses had a speech problem, but God made him a leader. David was just a shepherd boy, but God made him a king. Peter was impulsive and unreliable, but God built his church on him. And you, whatever weakness you think is holding you back tonight, I want to tell you that weakness is the very thing God can use to make you unstoppable. Acknowledge your weakness. The first step to changing your weakness into strength is to admit it. Too many people walk around pretending to have it all together. They act like they have no weaknesses, but inside they are crumbling. Let me tell you something. It is not weakness to admit your struggles. It is not weakness to say, I need help. Because when you admit your weakness, you invite God to come in and turn it into something powerful. See weakness as an opportunity, not a limitation. Most people see weakness as a barrier, something that stops them. But I want you to flip that mindset tonight. What if your greatest limitation is actually your greatest opportunity? What if the thing you struggle with most is the very thing that will make you great? Helen Keller was blind and deaf, yet she inspired millions. Thomas Edison failed over 1,000 times, yet he invented the light bulb. Oprah Winfrey was told she wasn't good enough for television, yet she became the most influential woman in media. Weaknesses do not define you. What you do with them does. Face your weakness head on. Too many people run from their weaknesses. They avoid them. They ignore them. They pretend they don't exist. But you cannot change what you refuse to face. If you struggle with fear, face it. If you struggle with self-doubt, challenge it. If you struggle with discipline, work on it every single day. The moment you confront your weakness is the moment it starts losing power over you. Develop the habit of strengthening yourself. You don't get stronger by hoping, you get stronger by training. Athletes don't wake up champions, they train every day. Soldiers don't become warriors overnight, they train in battle. And you will not turn your weakness into strength by accident. It will take work. Start small, but start today. Change the way you speak about your weakness. Stop saying, I can't. Stop saying, I'll never be good at this. Stop saying, this is just who I am. The Bible says, let the weak say, I am strong. The words you speak over your life have power. So instead of saying, I can't, start saying, I am learning. Instead of saying, I'm not good enough, start saying, I am growing. Instead of saying, I'm weak, start saying, I am becoming stronger every day. Use your weakness to help others. Sometimes your greatest weakness is the very thing that will allow you to help others. A man who once struggled with addiction can help others break free. A woman who once battled self-doubt can now inspire others to believe in themselves. A person who has been through deep pain can comfort those who are hurting. Your weakness is not just about you. God wants to use it to change the world. Find the right people to walk with you. You cannot do this alone. You need people who believe in you, people who will push you to be better. If you surround yourself with people who tell you your weakness will always hold you back, you'll start believing them. But if you walk with people who encourage you, who inspire you, who push you forward, then your weakness will no longer be a limitation, but a launching pad. Be patient with yourself. Turning weakness into strength is not an overnight process. It takes time, it takes persistence, it takes faith. Don't give up just because you don't see results right away. Keep working, keep growing, keep pushing forward. The small efforts you make today will become the strength you carry tomorrow. Let God work through you. When you rely on your own strength, you will fail. But when you let God work through you, nothing is impossible. The Apostle Paul said, "When I am weak, then I am strong." Why? Because his strength didn't come from himself, it came from God. If you feel weak, if you feel like you're not enough, if you feel like your struggles are too much, God is saying to you tonight, I will be your strength. Keep moving forward. Weakness will only hold you back if you let it. But if you take action, if you keep moving forward, if you refuse to quit, nothing can stop you. There will be days when you want to give up. There will be moments when you feel like you're not making progress. But I want you to hear this. Do not quit. Because your greatest strength is being built in the moments when you feel weak, but keep going anyway. Brothers and sisters, tonight I want you to make a decision. Are you going to let your weakness define you, or are you going to rise above it? Are you going to keep making excuses, or are you going to take action? Are you going to let fear hold you back, or are you going to step into your destiny? Because I believe with all my heart, God did not create you to live in weakness. He created you to be strong, to be victorious, to overcome every obstacle that stands in your way. And if you take that step tonight, if you start working on your weaknesses, if you refuse to quit, then one day you will look back and realize your greatest weakness has become your greatest strength. There is a powerful truth that many people spend their entire lives running from. We all have weaknesses, every single one of us. No matter how successful, intelligent, or talented a person may seem, there are areas where they struggle. There are limitations they face. There are battles they fight in silence. But here's where most people go wrong. They deny their weaknesses. They hide them. They cover them up with pride, fear, or excuses. They pretend to be stronger than they really are because they believe admitting weakness makes them look weak. Yet, the paradox of life is this: true strength begins the moment you acknowledge your weakness. Think about a person lost in the wilderness. If they refuse to admit they are lost, they will wander in circles, making their situation worse. But the moment they accept the truth, I am lost, that's the moment they can pull out a map, ask for help, or find their way out. The same is true in life. If you never acknowledge your weakness, you will never grow beyond it. The greatest leaders, the strongest warriors, and the most successful people in history were not those who pretended to have it all together. They were the ones who faced their weaknesses, looked them in the eye, and decided to overcome them. Take Thomas Edison, for example. He could have given up after the first few failed attempts at inventing the light bulb. He could have said, I'm just not smart enough. I don't have what it takes. But instead, he acknowledged his failures, learned from them, and used them to push forward. That's why even after thousands of mistakes, he didn't see them as failure, he saw them as lessons. And because he was willing to acknowledge what wasn't working, he was able to finally create something that changed the world. Or consider Abraham Lincoln. Many people don't know this, but before he became one of the greatest presidents in history, he failed over and over again. He lost multiple elections. He faced deep depression. He struggled with self-doubt. But instead of ignoring those struggles, instead of pretending he had everything figured out, he acknowledged them. He didn't run from his weaknesses. He learned from them. And that's why when the time came for him to lead a divided nation, he had the wisdom, patience, and resilience to guide America through one of its darkest hours. You see, weakness is not your enemy, denial is. Think about your own life. How often have you told yourself, I'm fine, I don't need help, there's nothing wrong with me? Maybe you've been holding on to pride, refusing to admit that you need to change. Maybe you've been stuck in bad habits, but keep making excuses for them. Maybe you've been afraid to ask for help because you think it makes you look weak. But let me tell you something. Acknowledging your weakness is the most courageous thing you can do. Because when you admit your weakness, you open the door for growth. A person who acknowledges they are out of shape can start working toward better health. A person who acknowledges they struggle with discipline can develop better habits. A person who acknowledges they lack knowledge in a certain area can start learning and improving. But the person who refuses to admit their struggles, they stay stuck. It's like someone with a broken leg who refuses to see a doctor. They might say, I'm fine, I don't need help. But every step they take is filled with pain. Every movement makes the injury worse. If they would just acknowledge the truth, I am hurt and I need help, then healing could begin. So I ask you, what are you refusing to acknowledge in your life? Is it fear? Is it laziness? Is it insecurity? Is it the need for control? Is it the unwillingness to ask for help? Whatever it is, I challenge you to confront it today. Because the moment you acknowledge your weakness is the moment you take the first step toward turning it into strength. Look at the greatest athletes. The best ones don't say, I have no weaknesses. No, they identify exactly where they need to improve, and they focus on those areas until they get better. Look at the most successful business leaders. They don't pretend to know everything. They surround themselves with people who are stronger in areas where they are weak. They seek advice. They listen. Even the greatest men and women of faith in the Bible were not without flaws. Moses doubted himself. Peter was impulsive. Paul had a past filled with mistakes. But the difference is they didn't let their weaknesses define them. They acknowledged them, and they let God transform them. So today, make a decision. Be honest with yourself. Look at the areas where you need to grow, not with shame, not with fear, but with courage. Because the truth is, your weaknesses are not permanent. A weakness you acknowledge today can be a strength you carry tomorrow. A fear you admit today can be the courage you walk in tomorrow. A failure you face today can be the lesson that leads you to success tomorrow. But it all starts with this: stop running, stop denying, be real with yourself, and watch how your greatest struggles turn into your greatest victories. Most people see weakness as something to be ashamed of. They see it as a roadblock, something that stops them from achieving greatness. But what if I told you that your weakness is not your enemy? What if I told you that the very thing you see as a limitation is actually your greatest opportunity? History is filled with stories of men and women who turned their weaknesses into stepping stones for success. They understood something that most people never realize. Weakness is not the end of the road. It is the beginning of something greater. Think about Thomas Edison. He wasn't the smartest student. In fact, his teachers called him too stupid to learn. But instead of letting that label define him, he saw his struggles in school as an opportunity to think differently. Instead of following traditional learning methods, he found new ways to experiment, to create, to innovate. And because of that, he became one of the greatest inventors in history. The world today is brighter, literally, because one man refused to see his weakness as a limitation. Now, let's bring it to a more personal level. Imagine a young man who struggles with public speaking. Every time he stands in front of an audience, his hands shake, his voice trembles, and his mind goes blank. He could easily decide, this is just who I am. I'll never be good at this. He could avoid every situation that requires him to speak. He could let that weakness control him for the rest of his life. But what if instead he saw it as an opportunity? What if he said, this fear is telling me something? It's telling me that I have something valuable to say, and I need to develop this skill. So he starts small. He speaks in front of a mirror. He records himself. He joins a group where he can practice. And over time, that very weakness, the thing that once terrified him, becomes his greatest strength. One day, he stands in front of thousands of people, delivering a speech that moves hearts and changes lives. This is the power of perspective. The way you see your weakness determines what you will do with it. Look at Nick Vujicic. Born without arms and legs, he could have spent his life believing that his condition was a limitation. He could have given up. But instead, he saw it as an opportunity to inspire others. Today, he travels the world proving that you don't need physical strength to be strong. His so-called weakness became his greatest gift. Weakness is only a limitation if you allow it to be. But if you shift your mindset, if you start to see it differently, it becomes a doorway to transformation. Think of the caterpillar. In its current state, it is slow, it is vulnerable, it is weak. But the caterpillar does not stay that way forever. It enters a process, a struggle, a transformation. And in that struggle, something incredible happens. What was once a weakness, a limitation, turns into wings. It turns into freedom. The same is true for you. Right now, there may be things you struggle with. You may feel like you're not strong enough, not smart enough, not talented enough. But what if, instead of saying, I'm not good at this, you ask yourself, how can this make me better? Instead of saying, I'll never overcome this, ask yourself, what can I learn from this? Instead of saying, I wish I was different, say, this is the exact thing that will shape me into who I'm meant to be. Weakness is an opportunity to grow. It is an opportunity to learn. It is an opportunity to become someone stronger than you ever thought possible. Michael Jordan, one of the greatest basketball players of all time, was cut from his high school team. Can you imagine what would have happened if he had seen that as a limitation, if he had let that failure define him? But he didn't. He saw it as an opportunity to work harder, to train longer, to improve every single day. And because of that, he became a legend. Your weaknesses are not walls, they are doors. They are invitations to step into the next level of your life. So the question is, will you let your weakness stop you, or will you use it to rise? The choice is yours. But remember this, every great achievement, every incredible success, every powerful story begins with someone who refused to see their weakness as a limitation. It begins with someone like you. Most people run from their weaknesses. They cover them up, deny them, or avoid situations that expose them. But here's the truth. What you refuse to face will always control you. The only way to conquer weakness is to confront it directly, to stand in front of it and say, you will not define me. Think about a person who is afraid of water. They never learned to swim, so every time they see a pool, a lake, or the ocean, they shrink back. They avoid situations where they might have to deal with their fear. But what happens? Their fear stays with them. It controls them. It limits their experiences in life. Now imagine that same person makes a decision. Enough is enough. They step toward the water. They start small, maybe just putting their feet in. Then little by little, they go deeper. It's uncomfortable. It's scary. But every time they push forward, fear loses its grip. Eventually, they do what once seemed impossible. They swim. And in that moment, they realize something powerful. The thing they feared most had no real power over them. It was only their avoidance that made it seem bigger than it was. Your weaknesses are like that water. They seem overwhelming, but only because you haven't faced them yet. Think about a person who struggles with speaking in front of people. Maybe they stumble over their words, maybe their hands shake, maybe they feel like they'll never be good at it, so they avoid it at all costs. They dodge opportunities to speak up at work, in meetings, or even in social situations. But here's the reality: avoidance doesn't make the weakness go away, it makes it stronger. The only way to overcome it is to face it head on, to say, I may not be good at this now, but I will be. To put themselves in uncomfortable situations, to practice, to push through the fear. And over time, what once seemed impossible becomes second nature. This applies to every area of life. If you struggle with discipline, face it head on. If you lack confidence, face it head on. If you have a bad habit, face it head on. The longer you wait, the harder it becomes. But the moment you decide to stand and fight, that's the moment everything changes. Look at some of the greatest leaders and achievers in history. They weren't born strong. They weren't born fearless. They had weaknesses just like you and me. But what made them different? They didn't back down. They looked their weaknesses in the eye and attacked them. Abraham Lincoln failed multiple times before he became president. He battled deep depression. He could have let those struggles stop him, but instead, he confronted them and became one of the greatest leaders the world has ever known. Oprah Winfrey grew up in poverty and faced rejection early in her career. She could have let those obstacles keep her small, but she refused. She stepped up, faced every challenge, and built an empire. Michael Jordan was cut from his high school basketball team. He could have quit. He could have let that weakness define him, but instead he faced it. He practiced harder than anyone else, and that's why he became one of the greatest athletes of all time. What if they'd avoided their weaknesses? What if they had run the other way? The world would have never known their greatness. Now let's bring it to your life. What weakness have you been running from? What challenge have you been avoiding? Maybe it's your temper. Maybe it's self-doubt. Maybe it's procrastination. Maybe it's fear of failure. Whatever it is, you have a choice. You can keep running, keep hiding, keep pretending it's not there. But if you do, that weakness will control you for the rest of your life. Or you can decide right now that you will face it. It won't be easy. Growth never is. But nothing worth having comes without a fight. Every time you push through discomfort, you grow stronger. Every time you refuse to quit, you gain confidence. Every time you look weakness in the eye and say, you will not beat me, you take another step toward greatness. This is your moment. No more excuses. No more running. No more letting weakness hold you back. Face it, conquer it, and watch as you become the person you were always meant to be. Strength is not something you are simply born with. It is not a gift given to a select few. Strength is built. Strength is developed. Strength is a habit. Every great person you admire, whether it's an athlete, a leader, an entrepreneur, or a warrior, became strong because they chose to strengthen themselves daily. They did not wait for strength to come to them. They did not hope to wake up one day with unshakable confidence, unbreakable discipline, or unstoppable power. They built it brick by brick, moment by moment, decision by decision. Think of a bodybuilder. No one walks into a gym for the first time and lifts hundreds of pounds effortlessly. Strength does not work that way. Strength is built through consistency. It is built through struggle. It is built by showing up every single day, even when it's hard, even when it hurts, even when there is no motivation. Now, physical strength is one thing, but the habit of strengthening yourself applies to every area of life. Your mind, heart, and spirit need training just as much as your body does. Consider a person who is emotionally weak. They get discouraged easily. Every little setback makes them want to quit. Every rejection makes them question their worth. Every criticism makes them shrink back. Now imagine that this person makes a decision. Instead of letting life beat them down, they begin to train themselves to be emotionally strong. They start reading books that feed their mind. They start surrounding themselves with strong, positive people. They start reminding themselves daily, I will not break, I will not quit, I will overcome. At first, they still feel weak. At first, it's still hard. But just like lifting weights, they keep pushing through. And one day, something shifts. The words that used to hurt them, they roll off. The failures that used to break them, they bounce back faster. The challenges that used to feel impossible, they face them head on. They have strengthened themselves. And the same applies to you. If you want to be mentally strong, you have to train your mind. If you want to be emotionally strong, you have to train your heart. If you want to be spiritually strong, you have to train your soul. It's all about habits. Look at some of the greatest people in history. They didn't just wake up one day with the ability to endure hardship, overcome obstacles, or achieve greatness. They built themselves into who they became. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison. He had every reason to become bitter, broken, and weak, but instead he strengthened himself daily. He kept his mind sharp. He kept his heart steady. He prepared himself for the moment he would be free, so that when that day came, he was ready to lead. Helen Keller was born deaf and blind. Most people would have lived a life of isolation and struggle, but she did not let her challenges make her weak. She strengthened herself every single day, learning to read, write, and speak without ever hearing a word. She became one of the most inspiring figures in history, not because she was born strong, but because she made herself strong. Michael Phelps, the most decorated Olympian of all time, trained 6 hours a day, every single day for years. Even on holidays, even when he didn't feel like it. Why? Because he understood the habit of strengthening himself. He knew that greatness is built in the daily grind, in the unseen hours, in the moments when no one is watching. Now, let's talk about your life. How often do you strengthen yourself? How often do you challenge yourself, push yourself, demand more from yourself? Too many people wait for life to make them stronger. They wait for hardships to teach them resilience. They wait for motivation to show up before they act. But the strongest people in the world don't wait for strength, they build it. If you want to be stronger in your relationships, practice patience and understanding. If you want to be stronger in your career, develop new skills and push past your comfort zone. If you want to be stronger in your mindset, feed your mind with wisdom, discipline, and positivity. Every day, you have a choice. You can stay the same, stuck in weakness, stuck in excuses, stuck in comfort, or you can train. You can show up. You can decide that no matter what, you will get better, stronger, tougher. It won't be easy. Nothing great ever is. But over time, the daily habit of strengthening yourself will transform you. You will look back and realize that the person you used to be, the one who was afraid, the one who doubted, the one who hesitated, no longer exists. Because you have become something greater, because you have built strength where there was once weakness, because you made the decision to never stay the same. The words you speak about yourself have power. They shape your mindset, your confidence, and ultimately your future. If you keep calling yourself weak, if you keep saying, I can't do this, or this is just the way I am, then guess what? You will stay exactly as you are. But if you change the way you speak about your weakness, you change the way you think about it. And when you change your thinking, you change your reality. Imagine two people facing the same challenge. One says, I'm just not good at this. I always mess up. The other says, I'm still learning, but I'm getting better every day. Who do you think will grow? Who do you think will overcome? The person who speaks life into their situation, the one who refuses to define themselves by their weakness, is the one who will rise above it. Think about a child learning to walk. A baby doesn't fall a few times and say, "I guess walking isn't for me." No. They keep trying. They don't speak defeat over themselves. They don't label themselves as failures. They simply get up and try again until one day they walk. Now imagine if you applied that same attitude to your own weaknesses. Instead of saying, "I'm terrible at public speaking," say, "I am improving every time I speak." Instead of saying, "I have no discipline," say, "I am becoming more disciplined every day." Instead of saying, "I always fail," say, "Every failure is making me stronger." Words matter. Muhammad Ali, one of the greatest boxers in history, constantly spoke greatness over himself. Before he was ever a champion, he declared, "I am the greatest." He said it so often that he began to believe it, and once he believed it, he became it. Now, he could have said, "I'm not the best right now," or "I have weaknesses in my technique," but he knew that the way he spoke about himself would define his future. And so he spoke with power, with confidence, with certainty. You must do the same. Maybe you struggle with confidence. Maybe you've failed more times than you can count. Maybe there's a weakness that feels like a permanent part of who you are. But here's the truth. It is only permanent if you keep speaking it over yourself. You have the ability to rewrite your story, to reshape your identity, to transform your weaknesses into strengths. But it starts with the words you use. Look at Thomas Edison. He failed thousands of times while trying to invent the light bulb. He could have said, "I just don't have the intelligence for this," or maybe, "I'm not meant to be an inventor." But instead he said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Do you see the difference? The way you frame your struggles determines whether they defeat you or develop you. There's a story about a teacher who once conducted an experiment in her classroom. She divided the students into two groups. To one group, she said, "You are the smartest students in this school. You have incredible potential, and I expect you to excel." To the other group, she said, "You have a lot of weaknesses, and it will be difficult for you to succeed." Now, here's the twist. The students were chosen randomly. There was no difference between them in terms of intelligence or ability, but by the end of the semester, the first group outperformed the second group significantly. Why? Because the way they were spoken to shaped the way they saw themselves. If that's true for children, it's true for you too. Start speaking to yourself as if you are capable, strong, and unstoppable, even before you feel like it. The words you say today will shape the person you become tomorrow. Stop saying, "I am bad at this." Start saying, "I am getting better." Start saying, "I will never succeed." Start saying, "I am on my way to success." Stop saying, "I am weak." Start saying, "I am becoming stronger every single day." Your weakness is not your identity. It is not your destiny. It is simply a challenge waiting to be conquered. And it all starts with the words that come out of your mouth. Change your words, change your mindset, and you will change your life. There is something powerful about a person who has struggled, suffered, and fallen, but refuses to let their past define them. There is something even greater about a person who takes the very thing that once made them weak and uses it to strengthen others. Most people try to hide their weaknesses. They are ashamed of their struggles. They think that if people knew about their failures, their insecurities, or their darkest moments, they would be judged or looked down upon. But what if your weakness wasn't something to be ashamed of? What if your struggle wasn't something to hide? What if instead of seeing your weakness as a burden, you saw it as a gift, one that could help change someone else's life? Think about it. Who do you turn to when you're going through a hard time? Someone who has never struggled a day in their life? Someone who has never faced failure, heartbreak, or fear? No. You look for someone who understands, someone who has been through the fire and made it to the other side, someone who knows what it's like to be where you are but refuses to stay there. Your weakness, your pain, your struggles, they give you the ability to connect with people in ways that strength alone never could. There's a story of a man who was once homeless. He had lost everything: his job, his family, his hope. For years, he lived on the streets, barely surviving. He was weak, broken, and alone. But one day, he decided that his past would not be his future. He fought to get back on his feet, to rebuild his life, to find his strength again. Years later, he didn't just keep his story to himself. He used his experience to help others who were going through the same thing. He started working with shelters, mentoring people who were homeless, showing them that if he could rise, so could they. His greatest weakness became his greatest purpose. Now imagine if he had stayed silent. Imagine if he had decided that his past was too painful to talk about. Imagine if he had let shame keep him from sharing his story. He would have robbed so many people of the hope they needed. And the same applies to you. Maybe your weakness is anxiety. Maybe you've battled self-doubt your entire life. Maybe you've made mistakes that haunt you. Maybe you've faced rejection, loss, or failure. Whatever your weakness is, there is someone out there going through the exact same thing right now. And they need to hear from you. They need to know they're not alone. They need to know that it's possible to overcome. They need to know that their weakness doesn't define them. Think about some of the greatest leaders, speakers, and role models in history. Most of them didn't start from a place of strength. Many of them struggled. Many of them failed over and over again. But instead of hiding their weaknesses, they used them to inspire others. Oprah Winfrey was born into poverty and faced unthinkable struggles growing up. She could have let her past keep her down. She could have stayed silent about the things she went through, but instead she used her story to connect with millions of people around the world. J.K. Rowling, the author of Harry Potter, was a single mother living on welfare before she found success. She could have let her circumstances break her, but instead she used her story to show others that failure is not the end, it is just the beginning. Even the greatest stories in history, the ones that move us to tears and inspire us to rise, are filled with weakness, they are filled with struggle, heartbreak, and pain. But they are also filled with redemption, transformation, and strength. Your story is no different. Think of the last time someone shared a struggle with you. Maybe a friend told you about their fears, their pain, their challenges. Maybe a stranger opened up about something they were going through. How did you feel? Did you judge them, or did you feel connected to them? Now imagine if you did the same. Imagine if you stopped pretending to be perfect. Imagine if you embraced your struggles, owned your past, and used it to lift someone else up. Because when you do that, your weakness loses its power over you. The things that once made you feel small become the very things that make you strong. The moments that once brought you shame become the moments that bring others hope. The weaknesses that once held you back become the bridges that help others move forward. So stop hiding your weaknesses. Stop believing that they make you unworthy, unqualified, or unlovable. Your weaknesses are not the end of your story. They are the beginning of someone else's hope. Use them, share them, and watch how your life and the lives of others begin to change. Who you walk with determines where you go. The people you surround yourself with can either push you toward greatness or pull you down into mediocrity. They can either inspire you to rise higher or hold you back in the same place. If you've ever tried to run a marathon, you know one thing: running alone is hard. The journey is long, the road is tough, and without the right people beside you, it's easy to give up. But when you have people running with you, something powerful happens. You find strength in their encouragement. You push through the pain because you see them pushing too. You don't quit because they won't let you. Life is no different. If you are walking with people who constantly complain, doubt themselves, and settle for less, then it's only a matter of time before you do the same. But if you surround yourself with people who challenge you, believe in you, and push you to be better, you will grow in ways you never imagined. Think about an eagle. An eagle doesn't fly with sparrows or pigeons. It soars high above the storm with other eagles. If you want to be great, you have to stop walking with people who are comfortable living small. There's a powerful story about a man who fell into a pit. He was stuck, struggling, and couldn't get out on his own. One by one, people walked by. Some ignored him, some shook their heads and told him he would never make it out. Some even laughed at him. But then one person stopped. Instead of just offering words, he climbed into the pit, grabbed the man's hand, and pulled him out. Now imagine if that man had surrounded himself only with people who ignored him or told him he was hopeless. He would have stayed in that pit forever. But because he found the right person, someone who believed in him and was willing to help, he was able to rise again. That is why you must be intentional about who you walk with. Find people who believe in your dreams, even when you doubt yourself. Find people who push you to be better, even when you feel like giving up. Find people who celebrate your victories and stand by you in your defeats. Look at any successful person, and you will see that they didn't get there alone. Steve Jobs had Steve Wozniak. Oprah Winfrey had Maya Angelou as a mentor. Even Jesus had his 12 disciples. No one walks the road to greatness alone. But here's the hard part. Sometimes finding the right people means letting go of the wrong ones. There are people in your life right now who are not helping you grow. They are keeping you comfortable in your weakness. They are reinforcing your doubts, feeding your fears, and discouraging your dreams. You must be brave enough to walk away from them. If someone is constantly negative, always pulling you into gossip, laziness, or doubt, they are not the right person to walk with you. If someone never challenges you, never pushes you to improve, and never supports your growth, they are not meant to be on your journey. This doesn't mean you don't love them. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It simply means you are choosing to grow, and not everyone is meant to go with you. Imagine you are climbing a mountain. At the bottom, there are a lot of people. Some are just standing around, talking, wasting time. Some are sitting down, refusing to move. Some are even trying to pull you back down. But as you climb higher, the crowd gets smaller. The air gets thinner. Only those who are strong, those who are willing to push through the struggle, make it to the top. Your journey is the same. Not everyone is meant to go to the next level with you. Some people were only meant to be in your life for a season, and that's okay. But if you want to reach your full potential, if you want to become stronger, wiser, and better, you must find the right people to walk with you. Listen, so ask yourself, who in my life is pushing me to be better? Who challenges me to grow, to learn, and to dream bigger? Who do I feel stronger, more inspired, and more capable around? Those are the people you need to walk with. And if you don't have them yet, start looking. Go where great people gather. Read books written by people who inspire you. Listen to mentors, seek out leaders, and surround yourself with those who reflect the kind of person you want to become. Because when you walk with the right people, your weakness turns into strength, your doubts turn into confidence, and your dreams turn into reality. Choose wisely. The people you walk with will determine the person you become. In a world that moves at lightning speed, where success stories seem to happen overnight, where we are constantly bombarded with images of people achieving greatness, It's easy to feel like we are falling behind. It's easy to compare our progress with others and wonder why we haven't reached the place we desire to be. But there is one truth that remains constant. Growth takes time. Transformation is a process. And no matter how fast the world moves, you must learn to be patient with yourself. Think of a seed planted in the ground. It does not sprout overnight. It does not grow into a mighty tree in a matter of days. It takes weeks, months, and even years before it reaches its full potential. If a farmer digs up the seed every day, wondering why it hasn't grown yet, he will destroy what was meant to flourish. But if he waters it, nurtures it, and gives it time, it will eventually break through the soil and become something magnificent. You are no different. Every great person you admire, every leader, every champion, every successful individual, none of them reached where they are instantly. They all had moments of struggle, seasons of waiting, and times when progress seemed invisible. But what set them apart was their patience, their ability to trust the process, even when they couldn't see the results. Imagine a child learning to walk. The first few steps are wobbly. They fall more times than they succeed. But what if that child, after falling a few times, decided, I'll never walk. I'm just not meant to. That thought sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Because we know that falling is part of the process. We know that every child will eventually walk if they just keep trying. Yet as adults, we forget this lesson. When we try something and fail, we assume we are not good enough. When we don't see immediate results, we assume we never will. When we struggle to develop a skill, build a habit, or improve ourselves, we convince ourselves that we are not capable. But the truth is, just like that child, you are learning, you are growing, you are improving, even when you don't see it. And the only thing that will stop you from reaching your potential is if you give up too soon. Patience is not about sitting back and doing nothing. It is about trusting that your hard work, your dedication, and your efforts will bear fruit in time. Think about a sculptor chiseling a block of marble. The first few strikes of the hammer seem to do nothing. The stone remains unchanged. But he keeps going, he keeps working, and little by little the shape begins to emerge. The masterpiece was always inside. It just needed time to be revealed. You are that masterpiece. Every effort you make, no matter how small, is shaping you. Every failure, every setback, every moment of frustration is part of your transformation. And if you stay patient, if you refuse to quit, you will see the beauty of what you were becoming. Sometimes we are our own worst enemies. We criticize ourselves too harshly. We expect perfection immediately. We compare our chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20 and wonder why we are not there yet. But real strength comes from understanding that your journey is your own. It doesn't matter how fast someone else is moving. It doesn't matter how far ahead they seem to be. What matters is that you are moving forward at your own pace in your own time. Think about bamboo trees. For years they show no visible growth above the ground, but beneath the surface, their roots are growing deep, spreading wide, preparing for something greater. And then, almost suddenly, they shoot up, growing rapidly in a short amount of time. But their true growth wasn't just in that final stretch, it was happening all along, beneath the surface. That is what patience looks like. Your journey may not always show immediate results. You may not always feel like you are improving, but if you keep going, if you keep trusting the process, there will come a time when everything falls into place. So be patient with yourself. If you are trying to break a bad habit and keep slipping, don't beat yourself up. Just keep trying. If you are learning a new skill and it feels impossible, don't give up. Just keep practicing. If you are building a dream and it seems like it's taking too long, don't lose heart. Just keep working. Because one day you will look back and realize that every step, every struggle, and every moment of patience was worth it. You will see how far you've come. You will understand that the waiting wasn't wasted time, it was preparation. So trust yourself, believe in the process, and most importantly, be patient. Because everything you are working for, everything you are hoping for, is already on its way to you. You just have to give it time. There is no greater power, no greater strength, and no greater purpose than allowing God to work through you. Too often we try to rely on our own abilities, our own wisdom, and our own strength to navigate life's challenges. We push forward, we struggle, we fight battles on our own, and when we fail, we wonder why things aren't working out. But the truth is, we were never meant to carry it all by ourselves. When you let God work through you, you step into something far greater than yourself. You become part of His plan, His purpose, and His power. And when God is working through you, there is no weakness that can break you, no obstacle that can stop you, and no enemy that can defeat you. Think of a vessel, an empty jar. By itself, it has no power, no purpose, but when it is filled, it becomes useful. A jar filled with water refreshes the thirsty. A lamp filled with oil brings light to the darkness. It is not the jar that has power, it is what's inside of it. You are that vessel. When you allow God to fill you, when you surrender to His will and His guidance, you are no longer limited by your own strength. You are no longer bound by your own weaknesses. You are empowered by something far greater. Throughout history, God has worked through ordinary people to do extraordinary things. Moses was just a man with a stutter, yet God used him to lead an entire nation to freedom. David was just a shepherd boy, yet God worked through him to defeat a giant and become a king. Peter was just a fisherman, yet God used him to build His church. None of these people were perfect. None of them were the strongest, the smartest, or the most qualified, but they were willing. And because they allowed God to work through them, they became more than they ever could have been on their own. God is not looking for perfection. He is looking for surrender. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to be the strongest or the most talented. You just have to be willing. You just have to say, Lord, use me, work through me, lead me. And when you do, doors will open that you never could have opened on your own. Strength will come that you never knew you had. Wisdom will flow that goes beyond your understanding. Imagine a branch trying to bear fruit on its own. It doesn't matter how much effort the branch puts in. If it is not connected to the tree, it will never produce anything. But when it remains attached, when it stays connected to its source, it naturally bears fruit. It doesn't have to force it. It just happens. That is what happens when you let God work through you. You don't have to strive. You don't have to force things. You just have to stay connected to Him, and He will produce the fruit. He will open the right doors, bring the right people, and lead you in the right direction. But too often we resist. We think we have to figure everything out on our own. We rely on our own understanding, our own plans, our own ideas. And when things don't go our way, we feel lost. We feel frustrated. We feel stuck. But God is saying, let me work through you. Let me guide you. Let me give you strength beyond your own. Think about a painter. If a brush tried to paint a masterpiece by itself, it would create nothing but a mess. But when placed in the hands of an artist, that same brush creates something beautiful. You are the brush. God is the artist. When you allow Him to guide your life, to move through you, to shape your actions, your words, and your decisions, He will create something far greater than anything you could have done on your own. But here's the key. You have to let go. You have to stop trying to control everything. You have to stop doubting. You have to stop holding back. You have to trust that He knows what He is doing. It won't always make sense. Sometimes God will lead you in directions that feel uncomfortable. Sometimes He will close doors you wanted open. Sometimes He will ask you to take a step of faith when you can't see what's ahead, but when you trust Him, when you allow Him to work through you, you will always end up exactly where you are meant to be. Maybe you're in a season right now where you feel inadequate. Maybe you feel like you're not good enough, not strong enough, not ready enough. Maybe you're wondering if God can really use someone like you. The answer is yes. He is not looking for perfect people. He is looking for willing hearts. He is looking for people who will say, "Here I am, Lord, use me." Because when you let God work through you, there is no limit to what He can do. He can turn your weakness into strength. He can take your pain and use it for a purpose. He can take your smallest act of obedience and turn it into something world-changing. So let go of the fear, let go of the doubt, stop trying to do it all on your own. Let God work through you and watch how He takes your life and turns it into something greater than you ever imagined.